Right, so I've got to be quiet because they're all in bed again. I've been up since 1:30 in the morning. So the pictures you're going to see today on here are of Oxford because I've run out of Bath. And we went to Oxford at the weekend and met some brilliant people, and this was just some of the pictures that we took because I quite like the little pun, young and old. So I'm going to go back into the Archetypes, said it right, and the Collective Unconscious by Carl Jung. I literally only get about 2 pages in. It takes me hours. So we're going to do it together, and so I got a little bit overexcited in this one. I thought by the end of it, I thought I was writing something quite good, which makes a bloody change for me, I tell you. So he asked the question: why have we not long since discovered the unconscious and raised up its treasure house of eternal images? So basically, why is psychology such a young science or whatever? And so he talks a lot about religions in these couple of pages. So basically, religions which have been polished smooth by constant use, offering exciting, captivating, beautiful illustrations of our inner world, have taken us further away from it and become meaningless. So the religions and the symbolism that the religions use started off back in the day trying to explain what was going on the inside, kind of thing. And because of overuse and just been used and regurgitated with like rituals, and we just do it without thinking. Later on he says, oh, you decorate a Christmas tree, do you really know why? You have eggs at Easter, do you really know why? It just becomes part of what we do. The meaning's lost, so it's actually, we've taken ourselves further away from the inner truth by constantly going over and over and over these symbols and these rituals, etc. So, for example, we don't really come up with any original meanings or ideas when we think about the virgin birth or the Trinity or the Son and the Father. They have become fixed in our head, so they don't inspire original thought anymore. We just, it's like being on autopilot, innit? And he says this is why European minds turned to Eastern religions. The symbolism was more exciting, it was newer, it sort of like triggered us potentially to think a little bit more originally ourselves. And he says the questioning mind will often turn to science. So I think we've seen that. So it's no wonder man is attracted to religious symbols, and this is a quote from Jung. They are meant to attract, to convince, to fascinate, and to overpower. They are created out of the primal stuff of revelation and reflect the ever-unique experience of divinity. That is why they always give man a premonition of the divine, while at the same time safeguarding him from immediate experience of it. Now, this took a lot of rereading. I think this is the only way, if you're a bit like me, that you're going to get this in your head. Because I started ploughing through it, reading it on the bus, and whilst doing this and trying to, learn it properly together, I realised I didn't understand it the first time round. I just skimmed through it, so it's really good, like really analysing every single page like this. So he talks about the Swiss mystic and hermit. Now, I'm going to copy and paste all my notes into the description boxes from now on in, because I can't pronounce some of these words. So you might as well just go and see how they're spelled. So the Swiss mystic and hermit, Brother Nicholas of Flue, so Brother Klaus, had a terrifying vision of God, which was full of his words, Jung's words. No, actually, Carl Bovilus's interpretation. Yeah, go and look at that spell because that's wrong. Which he said, Brother Klaus's vision of God was full of wrath and threats and was absolutely terrifying. That kind of vision of God didn't really go along with the dogma. It was as if he had a real, pure vision. he spent a long time ruminating on the vision, and apparently people who gazed upon his face, which had physically changed afterwards, were also terrified. So this brother Klaus had this sort of like intense vision, physically actually changed his facial features, and when people looked at him they were terrified. So he later made a mandala, which is in the church of, I'm not going to say this right, Sachsown. You need to look in the notes for that. And it's called The Pilgrim's Tract. So Jung says it makes perfect sense for him to have tried to restore his psychic imbalance by painting a mandala. So he says about mandalas, the protective circle, the mandala, is a traditional antidote for chaotic states of mind. Well, that was interesting for me personally, because I've always made intricate mandalas. I've done it for years, tiny little pens, really detailed ones. We even did one together on one of the Arty live streams that I did. That's still on YouTube somewhere. And so the whole point of the live streams, when I set up doing the Arty live streams a few months ago, was to try and alleviate the stress and chaos going on around us at the present time. And the very first one I did was doing a mandala together. I didn't even have a clue that that's, kind of what mandalas meant. I just sort of like instinctively did it for that reason. Didn't have a clue, never looked into it, but anyway, it's interesting for me. So Brother Klaus turned his disturbing, Jung calls it horrifyingly alive, I say terrifyingly pure vision into a dogmatic representation, to come to terms with it, which Jung said probably saved his life. He said, he eventually became a saint. But back in the day, if he'd started explaining what he actually saw rather than turning it into this beautiful painting, this mandala, which is, quite chill, if he'd have literally gone into detail about what he actually saw, he could have been, killed or locked up for being a lunatic, or he could have been burnt at the stake for being a heretic. So Jung says, by, turning his, what he calls horrifyingly alive vision, the pure vision, the actual archetype, in all its glory, by turning that into a dogmatic representation. Go and have a look at it. It's very sort of, I don't know, mainstreamy Christian kind of art. And by turning it into that, to come to come to terms with it, to explain it to himself more than anything. He probably saved his own life by doing that. So Brother Klaus needed to turn his archetypal image into something more palatable, as a contradiction between his vision of the Almighty and the loving dogmatic view of his religion could have caused a serious inner conflict. And this was in keeping with what Jung calls the spirit of the age, according to Jung. And then he talks about how, the religion started to crumble, and, you get Protestantism, and, it all starts to sort of break down a little bit. So back in the day, when Brother Klaus was having this inner turmoil and, maybe skirting around the edges of dualism, the whole church was starting to sort of almost do that. So Jung says, I say it was due to Brother Klaus removing himself from the usual way of the time, becoming a hermit, and this is Jung, gazing deep into the dark mirror, that he was able to have the original vision. He was able to break free from the dogma for a while. So this is Jung. In this situation, the dogmatic image of divinity that had been developed over the centuries worked like a healing draft. So it's almost like taming the archetype, I think. The real horrifying reality of, the wrath of God, etc., was had to be tamed, or he would have had to have faced maybe the fact that maybe dualism, I don't know. And at the time, being in keeping with the dogma of the time, that would have been too much of a traumatic thing for him to do. It could have sent him mad. So he talks about the German philosophical mystic called Jacob Boehme, Bohme, or Boehme. Now, he did like a mandala, questions concerning the soul. It's worth having a little look. It's almost like my it's like my crafty nihilist little logo, but turned inside out. You should have a look at that. So yeah, he sort of did a mandala containing one half light and one half dark, by way of coming to terms with what Jung calls the union of the opposites. So there was definitely, it was definitely the zeitgeist, the whatever of the time, challenging the archetype of what God was. So Jung says that, it's dogma that formulates the collective unconscious. And that got me to thinking about how religions are dying at the moment. People are starting to shed the beliefs of the past, maybe through questioning, maybe through laziness. So in order to stop us having pure original experience is with the archetypes right now, the powers that shouldn't be had to fill in the gaps. So hence, as Thomas puts it, the religion of the convids, he sort of goes into detail, and there's really good examples of how, washing your hands and the rituals and, it's actually become a religion. People are like venerating the convids. And I sort of said, this is why at this pivotal time, when the dogmas are breaking down, the veil perhaps is at its thinnest for whatever reason. I don't know, is it CERN, is it the internet, is it unnatural or unnatural evolution, is it this twinkly sky water? So that our experience of the divine, our inner truths, have to be overshadowed by a shinier, scarier, new collective unconscious. So one that has been manufactured for us and is now at full steam ahead, driving us yet again, as did religions beforehand, straight back into the dark Platonic caves, only to sit and stare at the shadow world, believing it is reality when in fact the truth is in the light of the candles behind us. For those of us who ventured out of the caves and are now viewing the terrifying reality of what our world actually is, it is of the utmost importance to stand firm and not turn back no matter what. So, in a nutshell, I think the religions are breaking down back like they did in St. Claus's time. People are starting to get in some sort of awakening, and the collective unconscious, the dogma of the collective unconscious is starting to be questioned for whatever reason. I talk about CERN and the internet and whatever, making our own twinkly sky water, our own collective unconscious. For whatever reason, people are starting to sort of challenge the dogma. So they very cleverly replaced it with the new one, which is, veneration of the convids and the cleaning of the hands and, the NHS gods. And so, pushing us straight back into the Platonic caves where we're just looking at the shadows and believing that that's the truth. But some of us maybe have come out of the caves and it's terrifying, like with Brother Klaus, the vision he saw of reality and the archetypes of reality, the real original thought archetype rather than the dogma and what he'd been taught all his life is terrifying. And it's terrifying for us right now, but somehow or another, I think the whole point of today's talk is somehow or another we have to stay firm and maybe not paint a false mandala to try and pacify the scariness of it. So, I hope that makes sense. Bye, guys.